Well, hello and welcome to another week on my allotment. And what have I been up to? Well, actually, I've been busy on the allotment. It's a quiet time of the year for me at work, so I get a little bit more time off than I would do ordinarily, and I've been using it to reasonable effect. And I think I've said to you that my plan is to go no dig this year, and as with all best laid plans, I'm having to revise that because you will be aware, because I've gone on about it often enough, that the plot is waterlogged and has been since the end of September. And I'm looking at the beds and of course the leaks I had to take out, and you know all of this. I lost all my parsnips, I lost quite a lot of leeks, although I managed to save quite a few. And a number of the beds, funnily enough, not all of them, and some of them, which are lower than others, didn't flood. So there's something going on with the ground which I don't understand, but some of my beds have been flooded and waterlogged since about October the 4th. And I'm looking at that thinking, well, they flooded last year, they've flooded this year, albeit this year for much longer, and they still are flooded. I've got to do something about it. It's no good, having root crops that I want to store in the ground this time next year, and this time next year they're waterlogged, and I knew they would be, so you've got to do something about it. So I've started, and the first bed I started, which I'll show you shortly, is the flower bed. I've always had a bed here that I put over to flowers because that's what my wife wanted. And it's always very nice in the summer, and she comes up and helps me deadhead the flowers and so on. Well, I've decided this year that, as nice as it is, I'm wasting ground that I could be growing vegetables on. We have some lovely, the garden at home is very colourful in the summer, lots of flowers for her to enjoy, and that's where they belong. So my allotment is going to be all fruits and vegetables. So I've dug that bed over because, of course, some of the plants, the flowers were tubers. Anyway, so they're all out, and what I've done is what I've got to do with the other beds. It's only a small bed, about 2 metres square. So I dug half the soil out to a spade's depth, a spit, and I piled it on the other half, and then I imported a load of chippings, wood chippings, that have been there for about a year now. I would like to put manure in, but we haven't got any. And the trouble is the farmer can't get here because the ground is so waterlogged, both here and at the farm, that he just simply can't get onto the ground to get at the manure and to bring it here. So we're going to have to wait. So in the meantime, I'm using wood chippings, which isn't ideal, but it's, it's organic material. Anyway, so I dug out to a spade's depth. I imported wood chips till it was level with the paths, and then I've put the soil back on top. And then I dug out the other half and so on. So that bed is now done, and I've got to do that with the other beds. It's going to take a lot of time and an awful lot of effort because that soil is waterlogged, it's heavy, it's claggy, it's all clay. It's not good soil to work with in this time of year. So anyway, that's what's going on. So the thing about no dig and just putting the stuff on top, it's just not going to work. I have got to bulk them up seriously, and it's got to happen before I start putting crops in the ground. So that's a bit of an ongoing project, and we'll see how it goes. But slightly better news, excuse me while I pop some more wood on the fire. My seeds have arrived. £82 worth. It's a lot of seeds, but that will see me through the whole year, from DT Browns, and I'm very pleased with them. That's a big order. And well, it is as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure more other people order more, but £82 worth of seeds. They've got it exactly right. There was one variety of potato that they didn't have in stock, so they rang me and we talked about it and we agreed a different one. And I will get those. They're main crop potatoes, so I will get those seed potatoes, well, probably in the next week or so, I think. They start sending them out at the end of January, from the 28th, I think, so, any time now. And of course, that reminds me that today is the last day that we're members of the EU. And of course, everyone has a different opinion. But my opinion, for what it's worth, I voted to leave, and I'm really looking forward to it. And of course, if you believe everything the so-called experts tell you, this time tomorrow we'll have no medicine, no food, nothing in the shop. all the normal disasters, but of course, as we all know, life will just carry on as it did before. So does that mean tomorrow will become a British Independence Day? I don't know. Anyway, 11 o'clock tonight we leave the EU. So what else have I got to report? I check my notes. Yes, at home, when the seeds arrived, I've now sown some cauliflower and I've sown my tomato seeds, and we shall see how they go. The cauliflower went in a few weeks ago and they're already up. In fact, I've nearly got the first new true leaves, but the tomatoes haven't germinated yet, so we'll see how that goes. And I'm going to start trickling some more brassicas, which, you know, to get an early crop on the windowsill in the spare bedroom. The other thing I want to mention is something I found quite funny. I don't know if any of you have noticed, I have a bad habit when I'm talking on camera, more specifically when I'm stood up. And I've never I don't know if I do this in normal conversation, but I certainly do it a lot on video, and the video picks it up, is when I bring my hand, I'm gesticulating with my hands, when I bring them down, I slap myself. I've never noticed that before. But I've watched a couple of my videos back just to remind myself what I've talked about, and I couldn't get over it. Have you noticed that? There, I've just done it. I've just done it. What a terrible habit. Anyway, Cheryl and I were in fits of laughter watching me completely oblivious to this terrible habit I've got, and I'm telling you, and I've just done it. I've got to crack that. I've got to stop that. Anyway, that's something else I'm going to have to work on over the next few weeks. But yeah, see if you notice it. I mean, if I notice it on the videos, I'll put something, you know, slap 1, slap 2, or whatever. But you know, when you're at school or you attend lectures or something in college, or, you know, just a presentation, if the person presenting or talking has some sort of tic or habit, it becomes very distracting because you start to watch for it and you're not necessarily listening to what they're saying. So please pay attention. I've got to try and stop that. Just something else to mention. My daughter has now started her own YouTube channel, and you can imagine my daughter's, you know, a young lady, a young modern lady, and I'm an old man. So our videos are polar apart. You know, she's very young and with it, and I'm not. So the likelihood that you're watching me on this probably suggests that you're not going to want to watch anything that Charlotte produces. But for family out there, because we've got family all over the world, yeah, she started her own YouTube channel. It's called, she uses her name, Charlotte Jordan. And it wasn't until I tried to find her first video, she's put out 3, she puts out a new video every Sunday, that there's a famous Charlotte Jordan. No idea who she is. I think she's an actress, don't know, but she looks a little bit similar to my daughter. So when you're looking at the thumbnails to try and find her, it's quite difficult. In fact, my mum and dad still haven't found her. But if you type in Charlotte Jordan birthday surprise trip, chances are you'll find her. Of course, Cheryl and I find them interesting simply because she's our daughter, and, you know, we're interested in what she's up to. Whether you'll find it interesting because it's a different world, you'll probably find her more interesting than me. But, you know, I just mention it because, you know, I should do. She's my daughter, and like I say, we've got family all over the world. So Vanessa in Australia, I'm thinking of you specifically. She's got her own channel now. You might want to go and look at it. So that, yes, there's her plug. I'd be a bad father if I didn't, wouldn't I? Right. The other thing I'm going to mention is I've got some specific priorities this year, and I think I might have mentioned these before. And those 3 priorities, crops I'm talking now, and they're things that I haven't got right in the past, are parsnips, in no particular order. Parsnips, all my parsnips rotted in the ground this year, and when I dug them out, apart from the fact that they were stinking and rotten, you know the sort of parsnip that you get in heavy claggy soil, which is what I've got, where you get a big bulk, almost like a turnip or a swede, and then a small leader coming off it, or several leaders. That's the parsnips I grew this year. and that's no good. I want proper parsnip shaped parsnips. So I'm going to grow them all in tubs and put a bit of sand in the tubs with the soil and see if that does any better. And that leads me nicely on to carrots. I grew carrots last year in the tubs. You may or may not remember if you follow my channel. It was actually quite successful. I had a very good germination rate, but the trouble was that the tubs were behind this shed, so they didn't get sun until about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which was no good. So when I dug them out, even at the end of the season, they were sort of little mini carrots, which is okay, but I want full-size carrots. So parsnips and carrots, and the last one is potatoes. All the potatoes I grew last year in the ground were ravaged by slugs or worms, or eelworms, wireworms, I don't know. But we lost 60 to 70% of our main potato crop. So I'm growing every potato in a tub this year. I haven't bought all the tubs yet because they're not cheap. But of course they'll last me as long as I'm here, so I don't worry about spending that money. We'll see how we get on with that. The tubs will be on the plot, but they'll be raised off the ground, and we'll see how that goes. So those are crops that I want to prioritise this year, simply because I've not grown them successfully in the past. So, without further ado, that's the preamble. There is something else I want to talk about, just to start off my New Year health information, but I think we'll have a little look around the plot first and see how that goes. I think perhaps I should name this a pond rather than a vegetable bed. This is a new addition to the plot. Built myself a bench out of old pallets, and the whole point of that is to be able to look at this view here. So this is the bed that I've backfilled with chippings and raised the soil. Bit of work to be done on it yet. It's still very heavy and lumpy, but when it warms up and dries out a little, which it should do now that it's above ground, I'll be able to rake it and pick out some of that couch grass and prepare it for onions. So I've just got to do that with the rest of the beds. And this one that had the leaks in is the next priority. I've already imported some old leaf mould and grass cuttings that have been sat for about 5 or 6 years, which is really nice stuff, and I've got to somehow get that under the ground. A lot of heavy sweating, puffing and toiling to be done. I'd also like to take this opportunity before I go outside to report that I do listen to people who leave advice and comments. Mick, especially for you, I'm wearing my wellies today because you're damn right. It's stupid walking out there in anything else but. So I am about to get very, very muddy. So wellies are the order of the day. Although the kettle's about to boil, so cup of tea first. There's always time for a cup of tea. I don't know if the video picks up the sound, but it's dropping down outside now. The weather's beaten me. I didn't really get much done. But anyway, I've got a cup of tea and it's nice and warm and dry in the shed. That's what it's here for. So I'm not going to worry about it. I'll give it another 10-15 minutes and I'll go again and see if I can't do a bit more. I'm also putting more chippings on the path because the path, although it's 3 or 4 inches above the level of the ground, the path is now waterlogged and soggy. I have had to put planks down at the bottom that you've seen before, and because without the planks I'd go straight through the chippings. The trouble with chippings obviously is they soak up water, so it's not, I mean it is working because I can walk on it, but at the moment I step off onto the grass paths, my boot goes straight through. But yeah, I'm putting a bit more chippings on, or I'm going to when I can get outside. But anyway, I thought I'd start this year's sort of health topics, and for those that don't know, I mention health because first of all, I've done a lot of research on health. Health fascinates me because when I left the army and I went out into the general public, or the general population, for the first time in my life I realised how sick and unhealthy people are. And it was quite an eye-opener to me. And over the years I've done more research on why things are the way they are, and of course it's all linked to food. You know, I've said before that the gastroenterologist looks at his subject matter, the stomach, and the oncologist looks at cancer, and the optician looks at your eyes, and the neuro doctor looks at your brain, and all these people are looking and specialising at the different parts of the body and giving you drugs and treatments and so on that are specific to that, when actual fact the problem is the whole body and the food you eat. So when you, instead of going to these specialists, and of course sometimes these specialists are necessary, I'm not saying they're not, but if you just took a different approach and treated the whole body with good nutrition, whole food, plant-based, then you wouldn't need all these specific people. You cure the whole. The analogy that Jason Vale uses, the guy who does all the juices, he talks about a goldfish in a bowl, and you know, you pour in a little bit of Coke, and you pour in some cake, and you pour in some meat, and you pour in, you know, and I know fish don't eat that, but it's an analogy. And you keep pouring, then you put in a bit of chemical, pesticides and so on, and you think, oh, that fish isn't looking well. Let's give it some medicine. So you drop some medicine in the bowl and you put in some more prescription, and you know, you continue. Eventually the fish dies because the water it's in is contaminated. And even a school child knows the way you treat that fish is you take out all the water and you give him fresh water, and he doesn't need all these other specific things. And if you think about the body as a goldfish, get out all the crap, put in some goodness, and all these different ailments go away. But there are other things. And of course that's not the way modern medicine works. Modern medicine is all about technology, because obviously technology is the route to good health. Not. But there are things, as I've studied, that fascinate me, and I wonder why people think the way they do, and you research it and you scratch beneath the surface and you find out the truth. That's why, you know, I don't know whether Donald Trump is an appropriate subject at this point, but you know, everyone has very strong opinions on Donald Trump, and I have no opinion on him because he's not anything to do with me. He's the president of a foreign country, so I don't worry about it. But actually, one of the things he says strikes true with me, and that is this thing he's invented called fake news. I see so much stuff on TV, and because I'm a certain age and a certain temperament, I end up ranting at the TV. Because you just think, if you could just listen to the truth instead of what you're spouting. Anyway, first thing I want to mention is the thing that you often hear in the media. Well, of course, we're living longer. And let me tell you, we are not. Scientifically, mathematically, we are living no longer today than we did 2,000 years ago. Which worries me slightly, that people can be so stupid. The reason we are, in inverted commas, living longer is a mathematical sum. What's changed over the last few hundred years is the mortality rates at birth. So if you have a population of 3 or 4 people and 2 of them die at birth and the other 2 go on to live till they're 90, the average life expectancy of that country is 45. And if one more of those people didn't die at birth and went on to live to 90, then obviously the corresponding, excuse me, life expectancy of that country goes up to, you know, I haven't done the sums, but what is it, about 70? It's simple maths. And, you know, back in 1900, the mortality rate in the United Kingdom was about 10%. So that is that 10% of people, children, died at birth. And of course, living up to 5 years old was a challenge. So that's what has changed. Not how, you know, if you make it through your first 5 years of life, 1,000 years ago, you could expect, if you weren't in a war, to live until you're in your late 70s, 80s, like you can today. It really frustrates me that people think, oh, well, we're living longer. It's utter rubbish. If you look at the science, our life expectancy, taking out child mortality, has not changed in 2,000 years. What has changed is we are living longer with sickness. So, you know, if you go to the blue zones, those societies and cultures in the world who live the longest and the healthiest, they live well into their 90s. In fact, some of them live, you know, they have many, many centenarians. And the last year of their life, they all take on a sickness, because we all die of something. There's no such thing as dying of old age. It doesn't exist. And so let's say they get, you know, some sort of virus or disease because their immune system is worn down. And their last year of life, they'll be in and out of bed, quite sick and unhealthy, and then they'll drop off their perch. Whereas in this country, it starts in your 50s. You start to get illnesses and sicknesses, diabetes, and of course heart disease. Everybody who eats the standard Western diet does have heart disease. It's not if, it's how much. And, you know, I've got customers I've been going to now for 11 years. And lots of them were quite elderly when I started. And some of them have obviously died. But those that haven't have got sicker and sicker. And their quality of life has got more miserable. And it's depressing and upsetting to watch. So yes, that's the first myth, that we are living longer. We are not fact. The next one is, I'm not a religious man, but if I had a religion, I would worship nature. Nature is a miracle to behold. It's wonderful, and the way that nature has evolved, and everything you need in nature is there. Nature provides, nature nurtures. It's just a wonderful thing. It's so intelligent. And then you look at, you know, you hear in the news that 12-year-old girls are having babies and going to secondary school and needing creches. And you think, well, if nature's so clever, you know, why does it allow a 9, 10, 11-year-old girl to have a child? They're clearly not emotionally or physically ready to bring up a small child into this world. Why would nature do that? Well, of course, as with everything, turns out nature doesn't. Back in the 1900s, again in the United Kingdom I'm talking about now, girls, on average, started their menstruation about 16 to 17 years old. Which, you know, if you have a baby at 16 or 17, you're still far too immature physically and emotionally to bring up a child, but you stand a better chance than you do at 9 or 10 or 11 years old. So this is something we have done to our girls. And what's happened? Well, it's hormone imbalance. For girls, it's all about hormones. And the body's designed to be in balance. And of course, it can't nowadays. And of course, one of the major disruptors of hormone balance is dairy. Because of course, not many people stop to think about this. But the milk you drink from a foreign species, when that mother, that cow, gave that milk, it was pregnant. And it's full of hormones. When a human mother feeds its baby, she's not pregnant, she's given birth, and the estrogen levels drop off a cliff. And of course, farmers and scientists have worked out that if you give cows growth hormones, they produce more milk. Well, they're not worried about the product. They don't care about the end state. They care about their bottom line, the profit. So whack in some more growth hormones and the cow gives more milk. And of course those hormones are passed on to humans. And in girls in particular, it messes about, and there, of course there are other things, there, you know, plastics and all sorts of, you know, is it can't remember the name of the stuff, but in cooked meat, they're massive endocrine and hormone disruptors. So the bottom line is that nature didn't intend human girls to have children or, you know, have menstrual cycles that young. We've done that to ourselves and to our young girls. Fascinating. Another one that fascinates me is, as I go to my customers, you know, they're either widows or, while I've been going there, the men have died. There's lots of women living on their own. And, you know, 200 years ago you could have said, oh, well, that's because the man worked down a tin mine all his life, and, you know, or an asbestos mine, or a coal mine, and he's got dust on the lungs, and he's, you know. But men nowadays don't, on the whole, don't do physical jobs. They put on a collar and a tie, and they get on a train, and they go to work in an office. And yet they still die younger than the women, on average. And I wondered why that was, and I did a little bit of research, and the most up-to-date modern scientific theory is it's to do with iron. We're all told, aren't we, heme iron and non-heme iron. Heme iron is the iron that is found in animals, and non-heme iron you get from plants. And of course, you listen to a dietitian and they'll say, oh, you should eat meat because it's full of iron, you need iron. You don't want to be anemic. And of course, when a lady's pregnant, they check all that, and so on and so forth. Well, it turns out that the levels of iron in your body, you know, you can have too little and you can have too much. Just because it's good for you doesn't mean more is better. And you can, a lifelong high levels of iron lead to premature death. And what they've not discovered this, but it was a theory that they put to the test, and they've not been able to disprove it, which is how science is based. That women have much, much lower levels of iron throughout their life because of their periods. Every time they have a period, you know, the body flushes out blood. The blood contains iron, so it drops every month. They lower their levels of iron. Any excess iron in their system is flushed out with their menstrual cycle. Fascinating. And of course, you know, I've heard, again, it goes back to this false or fake news that you should get lots of iron. If you don't eat meat, you'll be anemic. All vegans must be anemic, which of course is utter codswallop. The difference is between heme iron and non-heme iron. The iron you get from meat, the body can't regulate it. You can take up iron much easier from meat. Don't quite understand why that is, but you do. It's much more readily taken up from the meat you eat. But the body can't switch off heme iron. It can't regulate it. There's a surprise. We're not designed to eat meat, therefore we can't regulate the iron. We don't have the mechanism in our body. However, the non-heme iron that you take up from plants, whilst it's not as readily taken up, the body can regulate that because the body is all about balance. So when you're eating fruits and vegetables, the body's absorbing. If it needs more iron, it just ups its absorption. And then when it's got enough, with non-heme iron from plants, it stops absorbing. It has a regulatory mechanism built in for the iron that we are meant to get from plants. And it can't do that with meat. That's fascinating. Everything, that's why I go back to the thing about nature. Nature fascinates me. It's so intelligent. It's so finely tuned and beautifully tuned. And of course, we've come along with our technology and our arrogance. And we've said, oh no, we can do better than, you know. Anyway, some interesting points. Don't take my word for it, please don't. I wouldn't take your word for it. Investigate, research if you're interested. But I just find, you know, the closer you look at any socially accepted truth, the weaker it becomes. It's just that if you hear it as often as you do, you start to believe it. Anyway, I hope you find that interesting, and if you don't, you're long gone by now. And have I slapped myself? Well, I haven't noticed. What a terrible habit. Cheers. Well, yet again, I've been beaten by the weather. It's raining quite hard out there now. However, I didn't get to the bed, so I could have managed without my wellies, Mick. But it's just too wet, and I'd rather have the manure to put in there. So what I've done is I've spent a couple of hours wheelbarrowing in more chippings to redo the path, which was starting to get squelchy, and the bit along the bottom by the compost heaps was as bad as the bed. So I've redone that, put a bit more chippings down and made it a little firmer, albeit, you know, it'll absorb the water that's lying in the beds and it'll become squashy again, but you know, I can't help that. So and I've put, we had some at the very bottom of the old pile of manure. John has dug out a load. John's very patient and works very methodically. It's a pleasure to see. And he's removed all the crap and the stones and the bits of God knows what that was left in the manure. I guess the digger comes in to where the manure is kept and scrapes along the floor and picks up a load of detritus. Well, that was what was left where people have put it in their wheelbarrows and thrown out the stones and the rubbish. He collected all that up, and we've between us we've transferred it. He did most of it. We've transferred it into one of the wheel ruts that's getting deeper and deeper along the track in. So we've wheelbarrowed that into there. So hopefully that'll help, you know, keep the vehicles up from bellying out on the raised bit in the middle. And then he dug out a little bit more manure at the bottom, and it wasn't really manure. It was purely compost, really, because it's been at the very bottom. It was lovely stuff. And he didn't want it, so I've put it onto one of my smaller beds, which again helps raise them up. So I've done that, and I've done the path, and you know, I'll make that do for the day. It's Friday, so there'll be a hell of a queue of traffic back into town, so I'll go and get stuck into that and get home early before the schools kick out and the world goes mad on a Friday afternoon. And you know, I'm happy with that little bit of progress. So I shall, over this weekend, I shall sow a few more brassica seeds, I think. Maybe half a dozen, just to get an early start. Come February, March, you know, I'll pot them on when they've outgrown their seedling pots. But other than that, it's a matter of waiting now. Waiting for the weather to improve, waiting for the manure to turn up. Yeah, I'm itching to get started. It's interesting watching other people's videos to see that, you know, some people have started. I know Cliff at Castle Hill, he's sort of doing stuff in his shed that sort of passes the time and allows him to get ahead of the season without going out on the ground. I don't think he's been out on the ground yet. So, and I'm the same, you know, I've got to stay off the grass paths because they're just a mess. So yeah, I managed a little bit today, and you know, that'll do. So thank you for coming along. Thank you to all those who've subscribed. I do appreciate it. And I shall see you again in another couple of weeks. And who knows what I'm guessing it'll be more rain, but who knows. So thanks for watching. Look after yourselves, and I shall see you again soon. Bye for now.